All right. So why the Indiana sweatshirt? Because they need some love. Steve Air gave me
Yeah.
this great sweatshirt. It's nice and cool here in New England, and it's a pretty red. And the Hoosiers need some love. They've lost four in a
Yeah.
row. You saw one of them, right?
The thing about Indiana, I actually saw them twice last week, and I have them again on Thursday. Indiana has incredible pieces. Thinking back to last year when they were right on the brink of making the tournament and then dropped a few matches late because they had some injuries. This is essentially the same team. They lost their middles, but they brought in two really good ones. They're struggling. That team is just beat up. Their right side, Avery Tatum, is kind of like day to day. They'll play her and she does well, but not really practicing. Kim Hayworth also a bit banged up. That team, I agree, kind of needs some love. And I will say the one bright spot over the last few matches has been their libero Ramsey Gary. I mean, to be honest, she might be one of my top favorite people to watch in the country. I mean, she had like it was like 9 digs in the first set or something. When Indiana was just like not clicking at all and couldn't figure anything out, she was the only one that seemed to be really, really on her stuff. And I loved watching her. And honestly, I'm just excited to go home this week. So get to go to Bloomington and see the fam. And yeah, I'm pumped to see them again.
A lot of interesting pieces, but anyway, enough about Indiana as we and I've got all sorts of unsung heroes for us to check out. But I voted Dayton 16th in our poll, which just came out today, and uh, top four teams stayed the same: Pittsburgh, Nebraska, Penn State, Louisville. Then a little bit of shuffling. Creighton moved up to 5. I've had them at 3. Stanford, Texas,
You had them
Wisconsin.
at 3.
I've had them at 3 the whole time. Yeah,
Why?
and
Not
Pittsburgh,
why. I mean,
Nebraska,
good team, but like why?
because I think they're really, really good. And
Over Penn State?
yep, yep. Now
Compare the resumes. What are we doing? I look, I'm all for Creighton, but like,
I'm more eyeball than you, and you're all about W's. You have Nebraska number one. You're one of our 4 voters who has them number one. We have 8 voters who have them. You
so
know,
wins just don't mean anything to you.
well, yeah, they do. I didn't vote for South Dakota State. They're 18-0. Come on. Speaking of which, all right. So that's transition to the Jackrabbits of the Summit League. 18-0, the only unbeaten team left. Tough week coming up, but home Tuesday against South Dakota, and then home against Denver. And then after that, they got Omaha at Omaha. So that 18-0 precarious.
Yeah.
So where was I going there? Let me get back to where we were there.
Heck of a week.
Purdue, SMU, Oregon, or Arizona State, USC, Minnesota, and TCU breaks in.
Yeah.
We've talked about TCU, and we'll talk about them later because they play Baylor and Melanie Para. But have you seen Dayton and the Lexi Almadovers? However,
I've watched them once this year and they looked good.
yeah, I pulled up her numbers for this year. Okay, she is averaging 4.66 kills. And of course, don't forget too, they're what, 17-1, 18-1.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I'll go back to that in a second. She's averaging 4.66 kills as an outside hitter and hitting 313.
Okay.
That's in the Atlantic 10. It's not the Big 10, but it's still the A10. She got 21 aces, and she's averaging 2.3 digs. She's got 31 blocks, 6 solo.
All right,
That's
Beast.
those are great numbers. And
Yeah.
they have won. Hold on, they have won 12 in a row. They're 19-1 and 9-0 in the A10. And good chance they'll run the table in the A10 as well. They
Yeah.
should. Anyway, just want to give Lexi and her team love because I voted
I
at
uh
15 in our
I,
poll. They got
I
other polls
wanna
too.
yeah, I voted TCU at 15. I had such a problem with the 13 to 16 range between Minnesota, Arizona State, TCU, USC, and Utah. I ended up leaving Utah out just, I mean, I've watched them play, but just eyeball test wise, I'm like, okay, does a Utah team beat USC? Probably not. I kind of went back and forth on a lot of things for a while, but I ended up leaving Utah out. But they have an opportunity this week to potentially prove themselves. So we'll see them against Kansas. But I felt like the poll makes sense. And again, there's so many that you could flip. For example, Stanford Creighton at 5-6 totally makes sense. Have Creighton at 5, Stanford at 6. I totally see it both ways. I ended up having Creighton at 6 just because I thought the sweep of SMU for Stanford stood out, basically above the other top 5 teams that have already lost to them. So I don't know. Poll made sense. The bottom of it, again, it's like a coin flip once you get to the end anyway.
One more thing about Lexi Almadovor for those of you real old people. Long before Emily Ehman was born, there was a thing called the ABA, the American Basketball Association, and it eventually merged with the NBA. And they had a great team, the Indiana Pacers. who were a tremendous team. Darnell Hillman, Mel. Oh gosh, what was Mel's name? Anyway, that's here nor there. Uh, um, Lexi Almodovar's grandfather, Billy Keller, was a guard on that team, and I
Oh,
actually watched them win I almost said WNBA, ABA championship because against
watching last night. We're at the point of the season where it's all the same.
well, it is, and I wanted to ask you about that. So make a note that I want to ask you about what it's like when we get to the middle of the season. Anyway, Billy Keller was a really good guard. Yeah, I think he might have played at Purdue um, back in the day. Let's see here.
Purdue and Mackey Arena, where we had a match last weekend. Lee, let me tell you, the match at Mackey was the loudest match I've ever been to in my entire life. I legitimately could not hear, and I've been to some really loud matches. Mackey was, it just hits different. Holloway Gym's obviously a great gym. It's loud. It only fits about 2,500. They sold out Mackey for the in-state rivalry, and literally from a half hour before the match on, I mean, I was screaming the whole time. For the first 5 points, I was like adjusting my audio. I don't even know what I sounded like because I couldn't hear myself. I didn't know what was going on. It was crazy. I had never been a part of an atmosphere like that. They packed over 14, almost 15,000 people into the gym to set an attendance record for a Big Ten regular season match, but between two Big Ten teams. It was, and Purdue just put on a show. I mean, they just crushed Indiana. In the third set, I wasn't really watching the score because I could just feel how the game was going. I just like didn't look down, whatever. We had a lot of elements we wanted to get out. And I look down and it's 20-5. And I'm like, oh my God. And you would think the crowd would, not find it as interesting at that point, but they were still just as loud. I was like, guys, you've got to be tired.
Well, but that this past week there was a lot of real lopsided sets and a lot
Yeah,
of really vicious sweeps. But to defend my case about Creighton, by the way, 5-set losses to Louisville
I
and
know.
and Nebraska, victory over USC. They've beaten Northern Iowa, Rice, two good teams. They beat Purdue. They beat Kansas. You know,
Look, Creighton's in a position and clearly up to, the selection committee too didn't put them in the top four. They're exactly the same as San Diego was a few years ago. They're probably, I mean, I don't see how they could possibly get a top four seed based on where they are right now. They would have already had to be there. Even if they've only lost one set the entire conference season, but even if they don't lose another set, I just don't see how, unless the top teams actually start losing, which could totally happen, but they're also going to get some more wins. So I don't see how Creighton gets a top four seed for the tournament. But again, we saw San Diego take down Stanford on their home court, so it didn't even matter.
right. And I could say this about so many teams, but do you want to play Creighton in December?
No,
Heck
hell
no.
no.
Heck no. Nobody wants to play them. Anyway, so that's our poll. Kentucky dropped out. TCU moved in, and TCU plays Baylor this coming week. The former assistant Jason Williams, just like Sam Erger's doing so great at SMU. Can I give some shout outs to some of these unbelievable lines of the day? Jackson State's Jaden James yesterday, 28 kills in a 4-set SWAC win over Grambling, hit 389, 24 digs and 2 blocks. Don't get to talk about Jackson State much. Utah Valley's Sammy Blackett had 33 kills at 388, had 2 assists, 3 aces, 7 digs, and 7 blocks in a 5-set WAC win over CBU. Julia Cardona, we talked about her, the kid from Argentina who plays for Evansville. She had 30 kills against Missouri State the day after having 37 kills.
Oh my God.
My beloved Southern Illinois Salukis. I mean, I can only assume she's going to be the AVCA National Player of the Week. I have no idea.
Yeah, you gotta be.
But I mean, hey, she's pretty stout. There were so many weird sets where people just crushed people in at least one of the sets.
Yeah, and it's been interesting all year, even just when you look at literally the top 5 games. And every time they've played each other, it's pretty much always been a sweep, which is crazy to think about, the fact that these top 5 teams are all beating up on each other. Stanford sweeps SMU, that was a little bit earlier. But Pitt swept Stanford, and they've also swept Penn State. Like, just, it's been crazy at the top to see these high level matchups of top 5 teams that we hype up so much, and then it like ends up being a dud of a match. Or even like, I don't know, Penn State sweeping Minnesota and it's not even close. I want these good matches, and we keep hyping them up, and the play's decently good, but
Every time I think there's going
I
to
want
be
some longer matches.
Yeah, well, like yesterday, you know, Pitt Stanford.
Yeah.
Every time we got a showcase match on ESPN or ABC, it's a sweep.
Well,
And
Stanford also played horrible and they looked great against SMU. They hit 303, had 22 service errors and still managed to win. And then go up against Pitt. And to be fair, Pitt's defense is insane, but
how
they hit
about
under
this?
100.
It was the 9th time this year that a team has not hit 100 against Pitt. Are you
Which
kidding me?
again, Pitt's defense, I mean, that block is insane. It was interesting to me because Stanford's block actually has been getting a ton better. They put up 10 that night, and it's just crazy because they still weren't able to slow down Pitt, who hit over 300. Of course, Babcock goes off like she normally does, but Stanford had 21 attack errors. They only had 4 service errors, which comparative to the other night where they had 22 in a 3-set match is a bit better. And one thing that I will note, because everyone's like, why doesn't Stanford focus on getting the ball and yada, yada, yada. I had a long conversation with Kevin Hamley about it. And before the season, they actually developed a system, some kind of code metric, whatever, that measured how many service errors can they have percentage wise and it not affect whether they win or lose. And normally what you've heard over the last few years has been, okay, you want to be 10% error, you want to be 90% in. That has kind of gone out the window with the way that the game is and how tough people serve and how good the passing is getting. Women's college volleyball is moving a lot toward the men's game where you either got to bring it from the end line or you're going to get crushed. So basically Stanford with his metric found there is no percentage that allows them to win. So that's why you see them putting up 22 service errors in a match, in a 3-set match, and still getting wins because they found it literally doesn't make a difference. And that's point A.
As compared to lollipopping it over and it goes in, and you don't just give the other team a point with a chance for them to make a mistake. It certainly works at the lower levels. Hey,
Yeah.
is this true? Penn State and Nebraska played just once in the last regular season match of the season.
Penn
So
State's Penn State's schedule is I don't say easiest of the top teams. It's one of the lighter ones in the Big Ten. They only have Nebraska once. They only have Wisconsin once. Wisconsin's on the road and Nebraska's at home.
So I looked, that game is the day after Thanksgiving, which last year I went to Wisconsin for Nebraska at Wisconsin. Oh, you got that one?
Come spend Thanksgiving with me.
Well, I would, except that hotels, I just looked up because there's a football game the next day and hotels are going for $400 or $500.
Lee, don't even get me started. This is every single time we go to Penn State, there's always a football game. And I'm telling you, if we start a hotel in State College, we will be millionaires because the hotels go for like $1,500 a night. I mean, it's in the middle of nowhere, but yeah, normally we have to stay like 40 minutes away.
One time I covered a game there and it's Saturday night and it went late, but I still had to drive 40 miles to a hotel.
Yeah, that's
go on. Anyway,
every time I'm in Happy Valley.
How's Delaney Maple doing for Indiana? Speaking of Indiana.
Oh, she's a stud. I mean, she's great. She really anchors their serve receive. She's really fun to watch. I think she brings also just a lot of experience in terms of obviously playing wise, but also just like what it takes to get national championships. She won 4 with USC Beach. So I think that mindset's been good for Indiana's team. They're just through the ringer right now. I have them against Wisconsin on Thursday. So we'll see how that goes.
One more of our unsung heroes. How about Texas Arlington, the Mavs, and my boy JT Wenger, Brianna Ford, one of the best players in the country you haven't heard of. Road trip this week to Seattle and Utah Valley. The Mavs are 18-2 and have won 9 in a row, 8-0 in the WAC. And at that rate, they'll be considered for my number 16 team soon.
I don't know who I don't know where I am anymore.
The unofficial RPI has Louisville 1, Nebraska 2, Pittsburgh 3, and Creighton, the aforementioned Creighton 4, by the way.
There you go.
Other evidence. Trying to think if there's anybody else I missed in there. Jada Willis last week for Drake in a match against Bradley in the Valley, 45 digs.
Oh my God.
So way back when I said, don't forget to let me ask you since you already forgot. So we're at mid-season, right? And what I mean by mid-season, we're not in mid-season of conference play. We're in mid-season of the season.
Yeah.
And right now, the travel gets a little more tedious. The matches are not as glamorous as they were in the pre-conference. So like I think that's important too, because it's kind of like you have to ride this roller coaster. So
yes.
I ask you, you're not so far removed from it as a student athlete, or in most cases an athlete student, to know what that still feels like. And the old joke about Yogi Berra used to say this game is 90% physical and the other half is mental. But that's when you
Yeah.
gotta really dial in, and it's hard because you have exam because what I mean too, you have, midterm
Yep.
exams coming, and it's different for everybody except those ones on the quarter system like Stanford.
This point of the season is really, really hard. You're in the grind, especially for freshmen when you're coming in, because at this point of the season, normally they're done. They've never, maybe if they make the state tournament, they might play in the first week of November, but like they're mostly checking out. And they're literally halfway. They have so much left. And if you make the NCAA tournament and get all the way through, you're playing into late December. You still have 2 months to go in the season. So at this point, to be honest, it becomes a ton about managing and getting rest. I've talked to a lot of coaches in the last week or two, and a really big focus for them has been one with the travel, how it's been pretty insane across the board. I mean, of course, you think, at least even thinking about like Stanford in the ACC or the West Coast teams in the Big Ten, the travel schedule is crazy. And the biggest focus has been, okay, let's just give our players a day off, not even have them come in the gym, not even have them like come into lift. It's really about managing and keeping people healthy, because you could have the best roster in the country, but if you're not managing bodies and keeping people healthy, it doesn't matter. I think I remember playing, and at this point in the season, it becomes tough too. And say you're not even winning all the time, like just your confidence. I think that's a really big piece of it. I had Michigan State against Nebraska last week, and we had a long conversation with Leah Johnson, who is just absolutely lovely. She's awesome. But we had a long conversation about like, because I related a lot to being in college and not winning a lot of matches and just a grind of the season, waiting for that one win to kind of start a domino effect and get over that hump, and to try to keep up that confidence when you're facing top 10 teams every night. Like it's impossible to do. But at this point in the season, that's when it becomes really important to get rest and to have coaches that really understand, like, hey, we don't need to go all out all the time. If we have a training day, maybe let's take it light. Maybe a lot of teams have been cutting their serve and pass times down, but man, I mean, it's a grind. I'm also feeling it right now. Like I don't know where I am half the
You know,
time.
right, for starters, you call more matches than players play, and you travel more, and you travel commercial. The Emily
So
Ehman Charter Airlines hasn't begun yet. But the
So
other
wait,
thing,
I really quick, I actually thought about this, and I am way more tired on this side of it than I was playing. Now, to be fair, for the first 3 years of my career, I didn't actually play. I was on the bench. So like let's factor that in a little bit. But my senior year and I did play, I will say I am so much more tired on this. I think the travel gets to you a lot more than the matches do. And so I think about teams like Stanford and USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington that are like making these crazy trips, and they might be the best athletes in the world, but some of them are taking like red eyes home, and like an 18-year-old doesn't know how to manage a red eye. Like I feel for those girls because it's a grind right now.
with the dissolution, and I don't know if that's the right word, of the Pac-12 and now a Power Four conference. I mean, the travel for all the teams, in the ACC already, was spread out. In the Big
Yeah.
Ten was spread out, but now the Big 12, I mean, they're all over creation. It's a lot. And plus, the other thing that I wanted to throw out there too is this is the time of year where you start getting sniffles. One player
Yeah.
with flu runs through the whole team. Because
Yep.
when the weather starts getting cold, that affects travel. You can have weather that affects flights, and there's so many
And
things.
midterms and like bleh.
Yeah, a lot of that. But so speaking of the opposite of the, how about this week's schedule?
We've got some big, big ones.
Yeah, tell me which one. Well, we got Wednesday, Texas A&M at Texas, which is always good stuff
Yeah.
because this is their meeting in the SEC, something that legislators in Texas said would never happen. They'd never be in the same meeting. Yeah, sure they would. Okay, that's a Wednesday, and then Friday, I mean, Louisville at Pitt. That's it. That's the big one. And Florida
Yeah.
State in North Carolina is a big implication game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Emily provides the what's ahead list. Tennessee at Florida, which is turning out to be a pretty big match for both of them. It would have been
Yep.
anyway. And then we alluded to TCU at Baylor.
Yep.
Um, Saturday,
I'm so excited for Louisville at Pitt. I think it's going to tell us a lot. I think we know about Pitt already. We know what they can do. I think it's going to tell us a lot more about Louisville and see if they can really hang with Pitt. And that's one where I'm like praying to God, just don't be a sweep. Like be an exciting matchup. We deserve this. I think we've earned it, right?
yeah, you live by the pin though. And, you can die by the pin. I liken it to like a basketball team that shoots 3 pointers.
Yeah.
uh, Louisville is entirely relying on two undersized outside hitters who happen to
Yeah.
jump extremely high, especially Charity Looper and Anna DeBeer. Whatever was bugging her the first month of the season, she's fine now. I think she went
Yeah.
10 10 swings with 1 error and 11, or 10 kills with 1 error and 11 swings yesterday, something like that. I mean,
Beast.
they're
I mean, they've got a hell of a week too.
Mm-hmm. Well, don't you? And you said you're going back to Indiana, so you've got Wisconsin and Indiana Thursday.
So yeah, so Wednesday I have Ohio State at Purdue, and I haven't had Ohio State yet. So I'm
You're
really
back in
excited.
Indiana again this week.
Yeah, I thought about staying and I was like, I gotta go home. But yeah, I have Ohio State, Purdue on Wednesday. I haven't had Ohio State. I'm really excited to see JFO and see that team. Londot's like just the most fun person to see live. She's just a beast.
They're struggling so badly, and you
I
know,
know.
for them to
I mean,
turn,
they took Penn State to 5.
no doubt.
That was a heck of a match. And then on Thursday, quick turnaround, I have Wisconsin and Indiana. So yeah, I get to go home. I'm really excited. And yeah, but I mean, Ohio State, I feel like you never know what you're gonna get. They were playing Penn State, and one thing I do want to say is, obviously thoughts and prayers to Katie Schumacher-Colley, who's just announced she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I mean, she is one of the strongest people I've ever met. I think if anyone's gonna kick cancer's ass, it's her. So thoughts and prayers with her.
Yeah, and a random, ironic twist. She announced it, and then they had their big pink night.
Yeah.
And yeah. So, do you have games Saturday and Sunday?
No, so I have fun plans, Lee. I was gonna come back home and have this is my
More
literal
fun
only week.
than yesterday going to Northwestern Alumni Day.
I did get to go to Alumni Day. I didn't even mention that. That was so fun. It was great to see
All
everyone.
right, so next weekend, here we go. All right.
Okay, well let's talk about Alumni Day first. This was a bummer for Northwestern. They were playing UCLA, very good team. And the first 2 sets, they were like 29-27. And like Northwestern had multiple set points. We miss an overpass. We hit it out of bounds. We miss a serve. And it's just like, it was just a bummer. So we lose the first 2 sets. And then that was another one where I looked at the score and it was like 20-7. So the third set wasn't good, but they hung in there for the first 2 sets. Alexa Russo, she's a 5th year, their setter. She's also hitting when she's front row. She's so fun to watch. And she's one of the greatest people ever. So it was fun to go back for that. I love their head coach. Tim Nolans is awesome. Good to see him. And this weekend, it was literally my only weekend that I have off. So I was gonna have just like a nice, like fun Chicago weekend. But now that Indiana football is good, I'm staying home for the weekend, going to the football game on Saturday, with some of my close friends that all went to IU. And I haven't done a proper football game day since like high school. So I'm pumped. And the weather's like 65 and sunny, and the foliage is gonna be perfect. And I get to see my dad and my grandparents. I'm pumped.
Nice. Speaking of foliage, so this past weekend I went to Holyoke, Massachusetts for the International Volleyball Hall of Fame. And you can see the videos of the Friday Night Mayor's reception and the Saturday induction celebration. They're on ivhf.org, or if you go to the Facebook page. And I had a couple of speaking roles that I luckily didn't screw up. And it was just wonderful to see everybody. My late partner, Ed Chan, and the late Bill Kaufman from USA Volleyball both went in. And the first time we've had awards for media excellence. It was very exciting. Ed's wife, Julie, was there, and 7 members of his family. So other members, or 8 members of his family. It was very cool.
That's awesome.
Anyway, the foliage in Western Massachusetts this weekend.
I'm so jealous.
Spectacular. It was just incredible on the drive over. And then on Saturday afternoon, just as a little day trip, we drove up north to Northampton and back, made this big loop, and on these side roads, and it was just exploding out of the trees. It was so cool.
I love that. I think we're like a week away, but Bloomington, I think when I go down there should be pretty much peak. And it's like, there's nothing better than Bloomington during the fall. And I'm just like, also with the crazy schedule, I'm like, I need a weekend off and I need to have some fun. So I'm excited.
But so among the games that you won't be covering then will be Wisconsin at Purdue, Penn State at USC. So this is, the Penn State's first trip out for the USC UCLA swing. Utah at Kansas, that turns out to be a really big one. Utah, tough loss to BYU, and that's always special when those people get together, and that's great. And then Sunday, Louisville at SMU. That's a tough game, tough game coming off after Pitt. And then Miami at North Carolina. We talked those scores. Miami played at Boston College yesterday, and the scores were something like 26-24, 25-7, 27-25.
What?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm excited. It should be a fun week. I'm honestly really interested to see the Utah Kansas, and like, is Kansas still legit? And can Utah prove themselves again? I left them off my top 16 because I just felt like they had kind of like one good weekend. And I want to see them actually do something else. So if they beat Kansas, they'll be in there.
There you go. Well, I never have been to an Indiana football game at Indiana, but I did for a book I wrote called Tales from the LSU Sidelines years ago, book about football. Went up to go see Jerry DiNardo, who is the Indiana
Oh,
football
he's the
coach
best.
at the time. And of course, you know him from the Big Ten Network.
Yeah.
And he is a former LSU coach, and I needed stuff from him. So I spent time on this trip with there. And that was the first time I went to that campus. And what a beautiful campus. And,
Look, and I know I'm super biased. Obviously, I'm from Bloomington, but I've been to a lot of college campuses with work, and I think hands down, it's the most pretty, like by far. I mean, it's all limestone, and the foliage is just stunning. And I think to me, the only one, there's two that come close. I think Northwestern is pretty just because it's on the lake and you can see Chicago and it's stunning, but it's not Indiana. And then I will say Georgia. Georgia's a close second. Georgia's really, really pretty, but no, it's like Bloomington's just well above everything
they
else.
are absolutely fabulous. He said to the girl who obviously has never been to Pepperdine and or the University of Colorado.
I watched Zoe 101. I've seen Pepperdine, Lee. You don't even know what that is.
Nor do I want to know. She's Emily. She does volleyball analysis for ESPN, the Big Ten Network, Volleyball World. Follow her on social media at Emily Ehman. She is an industry in our sport that is a treasure. And I thank everyone for watching as I once again try to figure out how to stop recording so we can stare at the camera forever.